What are you actually buying when you buy luxury fashion? Well, I feel like people still don't understand exactly what it is to buy into luxury fashion or what the luxury fashion fan base or market really wants. Welcome back to the channel. If you're not subscribed, then simply welcome to the channel. Let's go ahead and get into this topic. So let's first go ahead and define luxury. I think a luxury is like a good or a service that you purchase that is a non-essential and it's for your personal pleasure, indulgence, or enjoyment. It can be usually presented in an elevated form or have superior and elevated quality. Notice I said usually, but not always. Let's kind of dive into a little bit of the nuance of that. It's important not to be excited completely by buzzwords, because a lot of times what people do is they sell you a luxury idea, but they don't actually give you the luxury product. It does take a bit of time and research to kind of understand what you're getting, but it's important to kind of like look into what it is that you're purchasing and then maybe review the history of that item. What is the reason for a pair of jeans or a t-shirt or a belt or a hat? How is something supposed to be made and for what purpose versus what are you getting? A lot of times things look aesthetically pleasing, but they don't really hold up as far as quality. They don't really have the same durability or function. And then sometimes they don't even look good. The marketing, the campaigns, the photo shoots, and all that stuff around the product can sell you on the idea of the product, and that ends up being what you're actually purchasing. That's kind of true even if you do get a true, well-made and fair enough luxury item. I guess the purpose of this video is to make sure that you're not being sold on the dream without getting the actual product. I do believe at this point there's the idea of luxury and then there's actual luxury, or if you want to separate it into luxury and faux luxury. Like I kind of stated before, quality I feel like is what is the intended purpose and how close did you get to that intended purpose and how long can I use it for that intended purpose. I think quality is mostly objective, however, there's some nuance to talk about, so let's get into it. There's a lot of videos on YouTube, and in fact, there's a lot of videos all over social media on any app, any platform, that kind of break down fashion, like clothes and shoes especially. They pretty much assert that, you're getting a bad product or this is not worth your money to buy this, particular boot or something like that. There's that one guy who cuts the boots in half and stuff like that and goes like, oh, this is a terrible Rick Owens shoe or a Gucci shoe. Buy my boot instead, and kind of feels like he's doing like a little bit of the same thing that the big conglomerates are doing, but it doesn't feel quite as nasty because he's like a small creator. And I have no doubt that he probably does make a good product. I feel like where those guys miss their mark sometimes is that they don't really address what we actually are consuming as fashion consumers. We're not looking for the best quality boot possible to go get Starbucks in. And at the same time, we don't want a terrible product. We want something that is decent quality for the most part, has a substantially better leather or canvas or maybe a nicer hand feel. I feel like those guys don't really hit the nail on the head a lot of times when we're talking about fashion and what we're buying when we buy fashion items. Again, no doubt those guys probably know exactly what they're talking about as far as quality and production of certain garments and what would the ideal best quality version of that be, whether it be a boot or a pair of jeans or a t-shirt or something like that, or even a dress shirt. However, as fashion consumers, honestly, we're not gonna buy it if it looks but ugly, to be honest with you. It could be the best quality boot or jeans or whatever in the world, but I would rather pay $800 for something that's lesser quality but looks a lot better than like the top tier quality thing that just looks horrendous. Let's just be honest. So when those guys kind of like preach to you about like quality and construction and what you're paying for, I definitely would listen to them to a point, but also like people like me are gonna say, honestly, we're not paying $1,600 to buy Rick Owens so we can get the absolute most like well-performing piece of footwear. What we're doing is saying, as long as I'm decently comfortable and the quality is elevated past stuff we would get at a normal department stores, and as far as the quality of the fabric, the leather, the hardware, zippers and stuff like that, as long as those things are like elevated to make my life a little bit better, to make the product a little bit better, I just want to look good. Outside of that is just about the aesthetic. It's an art movement, honestly. And you kind of have to understand that with fashion. That doesn't necessarily mean that you can justify any crazy price. that fashion designers or houses put on their garments. It just means that I feel like when you're talking about fashion and you call something good, or if you call it good quality, what we're saying is it decent enough and does it function as a fashion item? Most items that are fashion items are merely inspired, not necessarily a direct recreation. And there are exceptions, but you know, a Balenciaga engineer boot isn't for working, it's for an aesthetic. And it's an aesthetic created out of calfskin leather, which is a more expensive leather and a nicer feeling leather. It ages well. What will it look like in the future? And in such a way, I feel like that's the functionality that you're looking for. It's just for a different thing. It's not for working, it's for a continued aesthetic. So, in terms of like fashion and luxury, I feel like good quality is where function meets fashion. Objective quality in one aspect, objective craftsmanship, and then some nuanced taste in design. If you frame things from the fashion design perspective as in an exciting idea executed in a clever and technical way, then you have a little bit more of a nuance or perspective. Let's take a couple of products that I have here, right? Two belts. One belt is from Double RL, one is from Uniqlo. Now, right off the bat, Uniqlo belt doesn't have a whole bunch of detail, does have a brass buckle, and does have some minor pebbling, and it does add a little bit to the look. However, it's mostly not noticed unless you're right up on it. As a matter of fact, I don't even notice it. So it's pretty much just a plain belt. And it's not exactly, detailed. It's just pretty much a strip of leather cut into the shape of a belt and the buckle's attached. And it does work. It does. It holds up my pants. However, the Double RL belt, well, it's a different story. Although the base is both leather for both belts, the Double R belt is a little bit heavier. It's a little bit more substantial, and it's actually a lot softer, whereas the Uniqlo belt is a bit stiffer and lighter somehow. Probably still strong enough leather. It is leather. The Double RL belt still feels a bit more intentional. It feels sturdier. It feels like it would last longer, honestly. I feel like there's a bit of elasticity in the skin and the hide of that, cow that they use for the belt. Whereas I feel like the Uniqlo belt would probably snap under pressure because it just doesn't have that elasticity. It has a bit of rigidity. This is probably because it's probably from a different part of the cow's hide. And that part of the cow's hide the Uniqlo belt comes from just doesn't have those same properties that the Double RL belt has. It's probably also been tanned in a different way. There's vegetable tanning, and there's all sorts of other modern and more synthetic versions of tanning. That'll even affect the way the belt ages. The Double RL belt even smells better, actually. The brass buckle on the Double RL belt is so nice. It's shiny, it's polished, and that doesn't necessarily have to be the case for all belts, but it looks so good on this one. There's Ralph Lauren branding stamped into the brass, and although it doesn't actually give it any more function, it does look incredible. It's a nice little detail. Something only you would see, but when you see it, you kind of look at it and go like, nice. It feels a bit more smooth. The hand feel overall just a little bit nicer. There's grooves and ridges in the belt. And honestly, belts are deceptively hard to make. So I'll say that the Uniqlo belt for under $100 is a decent belt. And of course, out of the two, the Double RL would be the luxury item. But it's leaps and bounds nicer. At least the details that I mentioned, in my own opinion, are a lot nicer. I didn't even mention all the curation and research that it takes to sort of obtain the reference pieces for some of these pieces, like the clothes, the belts, the accessories, all come from a reference of like a romanticized version of the Old West. And most brands sort of do that. Like a lot of brands make reference to something that they're trying to like recreate in a more fashiony, like aesthetic sort of a way. But given that these reference pieces are often vintage, I mean, Double RL has to do an insane amount of work to go find those pieces in the first place because they just get lost to time. They disintegrate, they fall apart. And if people don't preserve them well, then I mean, that's just gonna happen. Ralph Lauren has to actually invest into buying those pieces. And that's the truth behind a lot of like brands that do this type of thing, even if it's not like a recreation or like a American heritage brand. It may not even be about the physical piece, but more about the idea of the culture and the group of people surrounding that thing that they're trying to reference, or at least the ambiance that they're trying to reference. All that being said, you get a little bit more value out of a true luxury item than you do, I guess like a more basic, just purely functional item. Now, to be honest with you, a shoestring will do the exact job of both of these belts. It'll hold my pants up. And as a matter of fact, when I used to skateboard, I would often use a shoestring belt because it was just more comfortable. And sometimes I even do that style wise. Like I just use a shoestring as a belt, or at least I used to. But something about a belt in and of itself just feels a bit more intentional, a bit more specific and classy even. And so if you're going to do that extra step to get a belt instead of just a shoestring or just a random strap to hold your pants up, then I mean, why not, if you can afford it and if you see the value in it, why not get an elevated version of what is essential to your life? All right, let's end with country of origin. This is another like buzz, I guess, term or whatever. Italy, Spain, and stuff like that, like Japan, you made in USA. These things are like sort of like buzz terminology words that people use to excite a potential buyer, I guess. But again, it's important not to get really excited by these like buzzwords and these countries that are supposedly only going to put out good products. As a matter of fact, most of the countries that put out bad products consistently are capable of putting out really good products, like China, Vietnam, and India. Thing is that they're able to make products so cheap, you just interact with the mass production load, the many iterations of like a shoe or something like that that's supposed to be sold at like Walmart or like a 99-cent store or something like that. I don't even know if we have 99-cent stores anymore. But there are also high-end brands that produce in those very same countries, and the quality is like night and day difference. And generally luxury items are expensive, but it's not necessarily the case that an expensive item from a particular country is always luxury. You can have faux luxury, and faux luxury essentially is, again, selling you a dream but not actually a good product. I hope this guy kind of like helps you like contextualize luxury in general. And if you're one of those guys that, cuts open the boot or, dissects the shirt and just says this is a bad purchase, maybe consider exactly what we're buying and why we're buying it. Until next time, have a great one.